Rob Makulak will be discussing one of my personal favorites, in-report grouping and data segmentation. So without further ado, Rob, take it away.
Thank you, Carnegie. We really should get some sort of a fanfare to play here at the very beginning. Was that a crowd sound? Okay.
That's a crowd.
Good enough. All right. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us today. I'm really gratified to see how many of you are joining us today. Actually, this is we've got quite a group that signed up and is interested in working with groups. I take it that means that you are the kind of users of MasterMine, or want to be the kind of users of MasterMine that really kind of dig into your data and work with it on a much more than just kind of a superficial level, and that's great. That is what grouping, or at least that's part of what grouping is all about with MasterMine. And what I'm going to try to do today is kind of start it slow and build up to a crescendo of goldmine data analysis, but starting really with very much with the basics. And our agenda is actually quite simple here. I'll bring it up. We'll talk a little bit about when to use grouping, like when is grouping an appropriate thing to do, and I mean I'll give you a sneak peek at my answer, which is really kind of all the time and not any particular. There's not a short menu of times when you would use grouping, and then we'll get right into grouping techniques and talk about the ways that you can do grouping within pivot tables to handle your data and your display better. And at the end, as always, we will do a free giveaway of a half-hour session of MasterMine or data manipulation or MasterMine report writing or analysis of your goldmine data, or whatever it is that you want to use that half hour for, kind of by way of really giving somebody something that's valuable, because we do sell that time normally, and also to encourage you to stay on the webinar until the very end, because if you must be present to win. Okay, so let's go right into when to use grouping in MasterMine, and I'm going to really talk about this in a couple of different ways. So the first way is which types of users of goldmine would be using grouping in their reports, and I just brought up a couple of examples here just off the top of my head. In marketing, of course, you want to be able to segment your database. Grouping is really very much all about that. I mean, grouping is not just a matter of identifying a series of, well, actually it really is. It's a matter of identifying a series of items within a field, making them be in a group, and then be able to sort of roll those up and maybe build a series of parallel groups within a field to actually get a many-sided field down to 3 or 4 aggregated items. That's just one example. So for segmentation, in marketing, of course, you really want to be able to take your A customers, your B customers, and your C customers. They may not actually say A, B, and C in the goldmine database, but based on criteria like past buying behavior and the potential of the customer to buy and the recency of the lead or whatever, those sorts of criteria are all contained in goldmine. That information is there. Why not take the information in Excel, segment the database so that you can get your best prospects up front, send them one particular message, your B prospects a different kind of a message, and your C prospects a third kind of message, that all work differently but appropriately for those segments. So just in terms of segmenting and understanding the database, that's the first part, of course, for marketing. The second part is the process of actually moving data to outside services, to work with Constant Contact, or to upload it for a mail house, or to do whatever you're going to do with your goldmine data in a practical, sort of in the real world sense. That is another reason to be using grouping and segmenting within your goldmine database. I'm not going to go into these actually in a great deal of detail here. On the sales side, grouping is probably fairly obvious. You want to be able to take in some ways do the same thing with the segmentation, but to assign leads appropriately across territories, but to do that by way of identifying key characteristics out of your goldmine data. Again, if it's actually in the data as an A, B, or C, that's fine. You can pull in the field that contains A, B, or C. But if you don't really have that kind of an arrangement yet, you might use your MasterMine to actually identify who should be the A's by using the segmentation and grouping process, and then actually use your updater to actually push the A, B, or C to the right fields. And then, hey, you've got a field there that actually tells the sales rep something every time that lead comes up on the screen. They know right away, hey, this is an A prospect. I better treat them with respect, or whatever they're going to do. And then, of course, there's within the sales area to group things by group, let's say, buying behavior or prospect, forecast by product, by region, by territory, by whatever information that's in Goldmine that makes sense. Making groups allows you to do that sort of thing, again, even if the actual data don't contain a field that says, product A, product B, product C. But if A and B are related to each other, you want to pull those together for some reports and show them disaggregated in other reports. That's all. This is all kind of theory stuff, so I want to get through this pretty quickly. And then, for the Goldmine administrator, data transformation, moving the Goldmine around makes all the sense in the world. This is what I really want to get to, which is what are your actual purposes when you're using the data, when you're actually inside of a report. In a way, the same reasons for using grouping are the same reason for having MasterMine in the first place, because data is simply too large for a single user to manage. And when I say data, I'm talking about records. Sometimes we're talking about only hundreds of records, but usually it's more like thousands, 10,000s, hundreds of thousands of records, which is a lot for anybody to page through, even if it's only thousands. Really, anything that gets above about 100 leads is more than one person can really manage unless they've got some mechanism for doing it. That's what Goldmine's for, and it's what MasterMine, sort of puts Goldmine on steroids for. So making sense of big data, if we're talking about really big databases, or dirty data. When I say grouping, and this is where I'm going to start to get into some other shades, and then I'm going to get out of the theory part, and we're really going to show some examples here. Dirty data. I will actually show a good example of this where we've got typos in the database. Well, just because there's a typo in the database doesn't mean that that you don't want a record to show up with its brothers in the same aggregated information. So somebody mistyped a prospect, the word prospect in the database. You still want it to show up with all the other prospects in the report. You don't want it to disappear because you selected specifically prospect. Well, this is a way of kind of pulling that stuff that's approximately the same all together, so that you're not missing things. Aggregating for visual simplicity. To me, if you're skillful with MasterMine, what you're really trying to do is get your reports down to where you're not searching all over. You don't create reports that you have to search all over the spreadsheet for what you're looking for. You pull things together. You aggregate it to make it visually simple, so that ideally any MasterMine report shouldn't really be larger than your screen when it's sort of in its resting state, and then when you go in to use it, maybe you might drill down through it to get to further information, or roll down some of the information to get to what you're looking for, but all within the context of the overall screen. I'm going to illustrate that here in a moment, but I just wanted to kind of make sure that we know we're talking about that. And that's actually what I mean with the roll-up reports as well. And then the other time, and here we're talking about sort of maybe the same people who do reporting, but who also might do data management, actually cleaning up the data. So it's one thing to fix your reports so they simply pull together information that's approximately the same. like where I was talking about with the dirty data. And then there's the process of actually cleaning up the data, getting your similar values together so that you can go back with Updater and actually put the correct value into all of those approximately similar fields to make the actual data simpler and more accurate and work better with your filters and work better with with really all the processes that you do in Goldmine. And then the kind of the last thing that I listed there, prepare a mass update or prepare a deletion. Again, it's about if you get your data fully comprehended, fully understood, and cleaned up and simplified, it gives you an awful lot more confidence when you actually go into that data and start deleting things or mass updating. I'm sure many of you know who have Updater. You can change a lot of data in a hurry if you've got Updater, and you want to be doing it accurately, and it's easiest to do it accurately if your data are cleaned up, if they're simple, or at least if your reports are bringing together the appropriate things. Okay, sorry for all that theory there. I just wanted to kind of put this in context, and let's switch over and really talk about some grouping here. I know that Carnegie is very excited for us to do this because, as she says, this is one of her favorite things in Goldmine.
Yeah, buddy.
So let's go through, and what we're going to do is I'm going to work with a couple of reports. Which reports we use is really almost, I mean, it's important for context, but it's not all that important in terms of, where is grouping available. Grouping is available, of course, in any report that you do. It's really a matter of what are your purposes for doing it. I'm going to create a basic report here, and I actually have some. I'm going to pull, the usual 5 key fields and the company and contact and so on. I'm also going to go over here and I'm going to grab the priority field and the sales stage field. I think I'm going to get my year-to-date sales as well, and I'm doing that. Those are, of course, user-defined fields, so I'm putting those in here as well. Where's our priority? There it is, and good. So that'll be the report that I'm going to create, and let's call this my my data analysis report. Now, why do I call this my data analysis report? One is I don't want to just use a generic name because it'll likely be overwritten if I don't rename my report. The next time somebody does a report on main contact information. The other reason to call it that is it's memorable. It's something that I will be able to pull up again later on, and rather than start from scratch, with a whole new report, I can start from a known place where I've actually done a little bit of work with my data if I save this workbook and come back to it again later on. All right. Okay, so let's talk about grouping. We'll start with some very basic kinds of grouping. So, for example, let's take our record type field. Now, you all probably have a contact type or record type field in your Goldmine database. It's the default key one when you buy Goldmine. You may be using it for other purposes. That's fine, but it's not too unlikely that if you were to open up your MasterMine and pull in the record type field, especially if you're kind of new with MasterMine, you start to see things like this, a much longer list of values in here than you actually have in the lookups for that field. So if I switch back here to Goldmine and we look at the drop-down here, there's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 possible values in here. In fact, we don't even have all of those in the demo database. So it should be a nice, simple list like this, so that you can create, as I've got in my own report there, a simple overview of the database. How many of each of these do we have? One of the simplest questions you can ask of your database. Now, you can ask that question here with this data, but what you're going to get is a little bit of a complicated answer because we've got some misspellings of some of the words that are in here. We've got client and customer. Actually, in this database, they really all ought to be customer because that's the rule here, but somehow when the data was imported or when someone was hand entering data, they just thought, well, I'll type client there because they're a client, or they brought a couple databases together. We see this all the time, multiple ways of presenting the information. So how do we group it? The most simple kind of a grouping, highlight the ones that belong together. Now in this case, they're all next to each other, so it's easy for me to drag select those, but I could just select the first one and control click on additional ones if they don't happen to be next to each other. we do want to make sure that we are selecting only the cells, not the rows. Notice if I go too far to the left, the mouse icon changes to an arrow. If I were to do that, then I'm selecting this row and not the actual cell. So you want to be sure that you are highlighting the thing that you want there. And unfortunately, these little these windows, this little bubble that comes up that is supposed to be helpful and explain to you what it is that you're looking at, I find that kind of difficult to work with. Here's a secret: turn that off. Under Display, you can contextual tooltips. That's one of my favorite things to do, little known thing. And then whenever you're hovering over your fields, you won't get that bubble that jumps up and it tends to be kind of confusing. Okay, so that's just a little side note there. I don't know what DC is supposed to be. That's some kind of an other. I'm going to assume that this is supposed to be clients. I'm going to throw the DCs in with the other clients there. And I'm going to group them together. Now, grouping is simply a matter of highlighting the ones that you want to be in a group together. Now these are items within a field, right? The field is record type, the items are the individual things. So this isn't grouping fields, we're grouping items within a field. And there's a couple ways of going about this. You could just right click and hit group. And when you do, you will get a dialog that allows you to name this group. Now why this is important is a couple of reasons, and do I want to illustrate that right now? I think I'm going to wait for a second on illustrating that, but I'm just going to put in a name here. Let's call this client. So I want to actually call these by the one value that's supposed to be in that field. Oh, this is supposed to be customer now I think about it. So I'm going to go back and highlight that and type customer instead. And you know that it's very easy to rename either items within a field or fields themselves, or in this case, this is a grouped name for the items. All of this is easy to rename simply by selecting a cell and typing over what's there. Now, a couple things that happened here. When I highlighted these, when I started out, I only had one field in my row area. Now I have two. The new field that's in my row area is actually a grouped field. It's the same as record type, except that if we look at the drop-down for this one, where record type has 5 different ways of saying customer, this one only has one way of saying customer. And that's what we're shooting for here, is an aggregated field that we can sort of substitute for record type that will give us the the simplified list of values that are supposed to be in that data. So I've pulled together customer. I'm going to do the same thing here with prospect and suspect. Those are really the same thing in our database as well. Actually, I don't know if they are, but I'm going to assume for the moment that they are. And now this time I could again right-click and choose another name another group, and it would pull them together within this same field here. So if I do a second one, it's not going to create another pseudo field here. It'll put this group within the same the same field here that exists already. This time I'm going to illustrate it by actually going up to the MM Tools toolbar and hitting Group Selected Items. This accomplishes the same thing as right-clicking and choosing Group from the short menu. It's just having it out. We just have it on the menu here, so it's a little easier to work with, or easier to find anyway. So these are our prospects, or it actually should say prospect.
Throw a question at you, Rob.
Go ahead.
Why is it important to use the original record type to make the next group? Could you not use the record type too?
Could I have highlighted it here, you mean?
Yes.
Yes, I actually could. But you want to be a little bit careful with doing that sort of thing. If I were to, let's say, put these two into a group together, starting in this field, that would add another level of grouping above it. In fact, I'm going to do that here in a moment. I'm going to take customers and past clients, and for some purposes I might actually want to have those be in a group together, and if I group, that's going to create another level of grouping above the one that I started with. And that's what you have to be a little bit careful of when you do your selection within the upper level of the grouping.
Thank you, sir.
I'll call this clients. Yeah. Okay. So thanks for the question. Good question. And so Now, the other thing to mention here is the naming of the fields themselves. There's a default name for this field. You don't have to accept the name that's there. You might choose to call it contact type or something else. You just highlight the cell and type a new name for it. And now, I usually like to leave the name something somewhat similar to the one that's derived from, just so it doesn't confuse you. So you don't start thinking, oh, there's a contact type field in Goldmine. Well, I see it in the reports anyway. Why don't I see it in Goldmine? That can be a little bit confusing. So be careful when you do that. But sometimes it just makes sense. You might instead of record types being grouped, you might be grouping, let's say, states into territories, and you pick the 8 states that belong in one territory and name that, territory 1. Well, in that case, you'd probably want to name this field territory, so that, and within territory would be territory 1, territory 2, territory 3, etc. And that would be, that would be logical to leave it that way, even though it's a state grouping. Technically, it's a state grouping that you're doing to make it. I'm going to go over and now I want to get rid of group record type 3 here, my other group here. So how do I do that? How do I eliminate of one that I don't want? Well, I could just drag it off and ignore it. Essentially drags it off the report and I'm not using it. But if I actually want to really sort of clean this up, I can get rid of it also just by hitting ungroup. So selecting the field itself and hitting ungroup will destroy the field, or in this case, well, I've only got one item here that's unique between these two. So if I ungroup even that one item, it eliminates that pseudo field and it no longer exists. So what have I accomplished by doing this? Well, basically what I've done is simplified my presentation. This goes back to, what I was talking about. Why, in the reporting context, do you want to use grouping? This is a simpler report. It aggregates the things that belong together, simpler than it was when it was the full, listing all the different possible ways of looking at this. And it allows me to get an overview of my database. I still see all 350 records in my database here. They're all represented. It's just that all the ones with misspelled customer are now showing up within just this one, within this one item here. And then I can, go ahead and do my other reporting on it and break it out by sales rep and so on. So that field will have all the same functionality that the actual underlying field had as well. Okay, techniques for grouping. Let's look at some additional ones, because what I showed you was just simply highlighting and putting them in a group together, but there actually are some very nice additional ways to do grouping inside of MasterMine reports. Oh, by the way, no, sorry, I do want to go ahead with that. So let's do this a slightly different way, and let's say we're going to clean up our database here. Or no, we might do this for cleanup, or we might do this for well, really any kind of purposes. What I wanted to do was, I wanted to group our users by title. So I forgot when I was creating my report to include the title field. That's okay. Let's go back and add the title field in. This is on the MM Tools toolbar here, and let's go get title. And the reason I want the title field in here is that what I want to do is, for marketing purposes, I want to send one kind of a message to people who are in the at the C level, and a different kind of message to people that are let's say in administration. So and again, I could go through this list and hand pick the ones that I want to belong together. So COO, that's going to be C level. CO, sales marketing, chief operating officer spelled out. Sorry, I had my control button down while I rolled my mouse, so it made the text smaller. So I'm going to just make it larger again. The owner, I'm going to say, so I just wanted to sort of use this as an example of there I'm grabbing the the C-level people. Vice President, VP, maybe not all the VPs. Okay, so I'm going to pull all those together, and that was my sort of manual selection to pull them into a group. Easy enough. Do that. Call them C-level, C-level. And I'm going to move that item here, this is something else that you may not be familiar with. As long as the field by default is in alphabetical order, but it doesn't force alpha order. In other words, when new items are added to this field, unless you specifically tell it make it an alpha A to Z field by selecting that sort, what you've really got is manually sorted items within the field, which you can resort. So, for example, if I want to move C-level up to the top of the list, I highlight it. I go to the edge of the field where my mouse turns into that little four-way arrow pointing four different ways, and you can get that at the edge of the field at the bottom like this, or at the top like this, but you have to be, it's kind of critical. There we go. Left click on it, drag it. You can see the sort of fuzzy line there indicates that I'm about to drop it right up beneath the titles, and so there we are at the top. So that's my selection. That's creating a group by selecting them one by one. Another way to select them, and I'm going to roll those up so that I don't accidentally include them in another report in another field here, in another grouping. And I want to use search field content function in MasterMine to search the actual content of the fields to bring together ones that belong together. So my second group that I'm going to go grab here might be ones that have the word service or customer in them, either one. So because I want to get everybody that's related to customer service and so on. So in this case, rather than go down here and read through the list and actually pick out the ones that all belong together, I'll let MasterMine search for them for me. So we're going to look for the word search and, well, or the word customer or CS, CSM, or variations on customer service and so on. Oh, I didn't want search, I wanted service, RVICE. SVC maybe. I'll have it look for any of those values within there. And I remember I got this just by clicking on the button up here, Search Field Content on the MM Tools menu, and pull those all together. So now it found all 6 of those. Now in this case, when you do the content, it actually also does move the result of that field up to the top. Found 6 items, great. It accidentally renamed it search. I think it was because that was the word that I started out with there. So this would be my customer service group. And you can sort of see that fairly quickly I could take the entire database of titles. There's 350 individual records here. There could have been 350,000. Among those 350,000 there might be several thousand titles. And it would be a drag if you had to actually go through here and read through all those titles and find all the ones that belong together. But if at that point, if you knew what you wanted to group these into, you could fairly easily and fairly quickly get these down to job function groups that will allow you to do some marketing to your group. So I'm going to just do one more here using the word manager maybe. Say OK. So everybody who had the word manager in it is now pulled together. And everybody else here is going to be an other. I'm just doing this to illustrate. So drag select the remaining ones, put those in the group, call them other. And now I've taken a database that had 200 some individual values for title in there and got it down to 4 job function groups. And again, I can use that field any way I want to for display. Pull this out of here. And within there, I can choose, okay, only my C-level ones, and do my report just for C-level, or do my report just for, whatever the other ones will be. So that is search grouping. Now, those 2 types are the main types of grouping for if what you're grouping is by character values, if you're working with fields that have text in them. Now there are 2 other major kinds of fields in Goldmine, 3 other ones really, but in this case it's really 2 because notes fields are also text, really text fields. The other important ones here for grouping purposes are date kinds of fields and numeric kinds of fields. So let's look at dates. Because dates is something that really, when you get good at working with dates in your database, that's when you really start to have a much better control of the reporting that you do, as well as an analytical ability in your database. That's really huge. So I'm going to start by with a date that's not grouped by default, and I'm going to use the create on date. This is the date that records were added to our database. Okay, each record in Goldmine has its own create on date, and by the way, you have a create on date at the contact level. You also have create on dates create dates for the individual, let's say, the individual calendar records or individual history records. Each one of those was created on a particular date, not necessarily updated last on a particular date, and both of those dates are kept for calendar records and history records. But if you get a little familiar with all of the different sort of behind-the-scenes housekeeping dates that Goldmine keeps track of for you, that really does open up some possibilities for doing reports. So, for example, if you had a sales team that was, or a telemarketing team that was setting up appointments, and you wanted to give them credit for the appointments that they set up, and you're going to create a report that tracks, how many appointments did telemarketer 1, 2, and 3 create on last week, this week, and next week. Well, you don't want to be using the date that they scheduled the appointment for, because they might have scheduled the appointment for 2 weeks from now. You want to give them credit for when they actually when they actually scheduled it, when the date that they managed to get somebody to agree to do a demo or do an appointment. And so in that case, you would be using the create date from the history item from the appointment, not the on date, not the date that it's scheduled for. So I'm just saying be careful about which dates you choose to do your grouping on, because that has an important influence on what your report tells you. Okay, back to techniques here. Create on. So we've got a date field here. Any date field that's in Goldmine will work the same way. When you go to create a group of this, now if I were to go up here and hit the group selected items button here, I could take a series of dates. I could say, all right, here's August 2009, put those together in a group. I'm doing this kind of just to sort of illustrate what a drag it would be if you actually had to do it this way. But you can manually select a set of dates and put them together. But that's not the way you work with them typically within the pivot table. A better way to do it is select a single item, a single date within that field, or select the field button itself. Either way, when you do that, if you hit the group button or the date range button, either one of these two buttons up here, you'll get the same result, which is you get a date grouping dialog here. This date grouping dialog allows you to take this one date field and really sort of proliferate it out into multiple date groupings. And what it's essentially doing is grouping these dates by years, by quarters, by months, by days, multiple things all at once. So if I click on, let's say, years, days, months, and quarters, I'll take all three of them, and hit the OK button, I'm actually going to wind up with 4 fields out of that derived from that one. The years, the quarters, the months, and the days. And by default, of course, they're in order like that, so you actually see the earliest date at the top and the latest date at the bottom, and you could take out levels of detail. You could remove create on, which is the individual date, and now they're grouped by months. Remove the months, now they're grouped by years and quarters. Remove the quarters, now they're just grouped by years. Or work with them in any combination that you want. You could ignore the quarters and just put the months in, or even better, do it sort of as a calendar where you've got your years going across and your months going your months going across and your years going down. This gives you a nice overview of your database. In fact, if I wanted to know when were leads added to our database and how can I know at a glance, how many new ones are we adding, what's the trend, I actually can look at this and understand fairly well. Okay, we haven't added any new records to our database since December of 2013. This is a demo database, not too unusual. In your own database, you're going to see ones that are in there. And from here, you might want to know, on the one hand, this is every record in the database, but maybe more importantly, how quickly are we adding leads Well, if that's the question, then we're going to want to do things like, well, actually, you wouldn't want to work with the record type. Probably want to work with your aggregated one, and say, well, let's leave off the employees because we don't care too much about those for this purpose, or vendors. We just want to know about leads that we've added to our database. Okay, everything else in there is a lead. There's a nice overview visual of our database and when we've added records to our database. One more comment on date grouping here. Actually, two of them. One is how you name your fields here is important, and secondly, your decision to include the fields in here to display or to use the fields up above for filtering. So let's talk about the naming first. So when you create a grouped data, a grouped date field like this, it typically makes sense to name the fields. Now years makes sense in that this is of course the year version of the create on field. But if you've got multiple date fields that you've got in your report, it probably is going to help you if you name this field something that tells you, well, what is this year from? What does this year refer to here in the context of the database? Well, this is actually the year of creation of the record. So you probably want to call this something like year created or create year or something like that that keeps all this in context. Quarter created, month created. And the reason for that is you're going to be moving these fields around. You're going to remove that, remove that. Now I'm down to just a date here. I'm going to want to know, well, what is this year? What is the antecedent of this year? What is it actually referring to? Rather than have to guess later on. There isn't actually another good way to know if you don't put a meaningful label on the field here. There isn't another good way to know what is this year referring to here? What date field is this year actually referring to? Once it's already created and you've forgotten what it was, the only way that I've found actually is to ungroup that date and see what disappears and then recreate it and then name it properly. So the second thing I wanted to say, as I said a moment ago about working with date groupings, is how you display them, how you choose to display or filter. When you do date groupings like this, I've sometimes seen people say, okay, well, I want to go in here and having grouped this together, I'm really interested in 2013, so I'm just going to go down here and I'm going to turn off all the other ones, but I'm going to turn on 2013. That's fine if you want to do it that way, but personally, I think that you're kind of wasting some space by doing it that way, when what you could do instead is use this as a filtering mechanism instead of a display one. In other words, move it up to the top, choose 2013, and then your filter is basically applied just the same way it is in parallel with all the other filters that you've got up above here. Because we removed some of the, removed some values there, and maybe we choose I don't know, job function groups. Let's take just the ones that are customer service. Whatever it is, it's usually best to have the things that you're filtering on where there's only a single item that you're filtering on or a limited number, but you don't want to display those items, and have those be up at in the top area, in the filter area, and leave the space down below for displaying what really needs to be displayed. It doesn't really help you to have, I see this kind of sometimes, let's say here's all your contacts that are in the customer service area, and wouldn't it just figure there's only one of those? Let's take a different one. Okay, so here's all your contacts, and here's the year that was that they were created. But we only want 2013. Well, if you're only choosing 2013, it doesn't really do you any good in your report to have it say 2013, 2013, 2013 all the way down the report, because that's what you were looking at anyway. Better to put that up at the top as a filter and use that additional space to show something that's important, like, I don't know, the titles of the people that you're working with. Okay, so that is start at least on date grouping. One other thing I did want to say about date groupings that's kind of important and maybe not all that well known. I'm going to go back here and add my years and months back in here again. And my individual days. And that is, when you do your grouping like this, you wind up, there is no single field that actually contains all the parts of the date anymore. And oftentimes people do want to actually display the full date as a field in the display area here. So we could just do, use the create on and the year field together as a group and say, okay, here's my contacts and the date they were created in the year. So it's date, year. In a sense, you're telling the whole story there. But oftentimes people want to actually have it say, 3/12/2013, and you don't actually have a choice here about the formatting of this date here. If you want to do that, the trick is add another instance of that same field into your query, which you can do easily enough with the AdField function. If I go up and say, I know that what I'm working with here is the create on field from the contact one table, so I'm going to go and just grab another instance of that, create on. Now I'm going to need to name it something other than create on because the first one is named create on, so I'll give it another name. I'll call it, I don't know, created on. And say OK. And so once that's been created, now I could drag it in here for my display purposes. I might still use the other fields for doing my filtering activity, but I can have this one in here for displaying purposes, and that gives me, both. It's kind of the best of both worlds. Let's see. I think I covered most of what I wanted to cover regarding dates. Let's move on to numerics. But when I do that, I want to do this kind of in the context of a story here. I'm going to do analysis of completed sales. So I've gone back to my create dialog here. I'm going to run a report of basically completed sales, and the purpose of doing the analysis here is I want to show my basically do an analysis of our customers. What have they bought in the past? What's their buying behavior? And what can we do with that in terms of setting up some follow-up activities with them that are going to be appropriate so that we can maximize our sales to this body of customers that we have out there. So I've started with this basic history activities -sale report. So this is the just what you get when you click history and sales and hit finish in the MasterMine dialog there where you create them. And I wanted to do some grouping here in this context that helps us to understand the data that we're looking at, or understand this database that we're at. You can do this with your own database. I'm not going to do anything terribly complex here, but I'm going to do it kind of quickly. So in this case, note that the OnDate field, whenever you do a history report or a pending report, the OnDate field is pre-grouped for you. And we pre-group it into on year, on month, on quarter, on date, and even on week. All those fields already exist. We just sort of pre-grouped them for you when you created the report. We do that because we don't expect the users off the top of their heads necessarily to know how to do date grouping, but now that you know how to do that, you can take any date that's in Goldmine, any of those hidden dates that are there, and you can essentially do the same thing that we're doing for you automatically with the OnDate field. Just to be clear, OnDate is, if I go to the History tab in Goldmine, is this date right here. This is called OnDate. That's the date that this, theoretically, that this activity was completed in Goldmine. Is it the same date that the history item was created? Not necessarily. If it was actually a scheduled item that was completed over into history, then the date that it was created, in this case 12/13/2007, is much earlier than the date that it was completed in Goldmine. In fact, Goldmine tracks for every history item. It tracks the date a thing was scheduled to happen or actually did happen, the date that the item was created in Goldmine, and then there's a third date here, which is the date, or sorry, there are 4 dates in here. The date that the, sorry, no, there's only 3 dates. This first one is the date that it's assigned to happen for this user. The third date is the date that it was actually completed. In other words, when was it moved from pending, sorry. So the data was last completed or the data was last updated. This is kept behind the scenes. So typically, the date the history item was actually completed is going to agree, the date that you see here is going to agree with the one that's here, unless someone has actually opened this up and edited that completed item, which will sometimes happen, days after the actual thing happened. They'll go in here and change the value here, and the code is no longer MM, it's IC now. That makes the last updated date be today, even though the on date is still, whatever it was. Okay, and it is important to know the differences between those source dates in your Goldmine data. Okay, so back, I just want to sort of clarify so we're clear. All right, we're talking about this is the on date field in Goldmine. And so by default, what we're seeing here is past buying behavior for 2 years, 2013 and 2014, month by month, with the number of sales and the units that were sold and the dollar amounts for all those. And we're showing both successful and the unsuccessful, in other words, the won and the lost sales, and then the grand total for the two of them. Okay, so that's our starting point. I'm going to clone this report, and I'm going to ask a question of this database. My question is, where are the people who have bought from us in previous years that did not buy from us in this year? I want to make sure that there is a follow-up happening. I want to make sure that we are not losing customers simply through neglect. And I'll tell you what, in every Goldmine database, you've got customers who have been lost through neglect, just about guaranteed. You should be using your MasterMine, you should be using analysis to figure out where those people are, who are they, and who ought to be going after them and actually get them assigned. So this is a fairly practical kind of a question. All right, so who last bought from us this year and who last bought from us last year? And so I'm going to accomplish this by organizing my report differently and doing some grouping. So to start with, what I'm interested in, I want to ignore the ones where we lost the sale. Right? We're going to turn off the unsuccessful ones because that doesn't tell us about when somebody last bought from us. So I'm going to go in here and actually just turn off the unsuccessful. That simplifies my display here a little bit. Now I'm also not interested in specific months here, so I'm going to move that out. Again, that's going to simplify my display here. But I do want to show the individual companies. My reason for doing that is for each individual company now I can see what did they buy in 2014 and what did they buy in 2013. Adamson Associates last bought in 2013 because I don't see any 2014 for them. Likewise for Advanced Product Solutions and so on. Here's CAD Tech Engineering. They actually bought in both years and so on. Now, have I got to my answer yet? No, not really. Because what I really want to do is group them together by the year they last bought from us. So the way I'm going to accomplish this is I'm actually going to simplify my report a little bit. I'm going to start by getting this down to only the dollar amounts for my past purchasing. These 4 records are are 4 purchases, totaling 5 units, totaling $149,000. So there's actually 4 records, 4 history records behind this one row. But any one of those will give me access to that. So I'm going to just eliminate the 2 that I don't need, just to kind of simplify this. So I'm right-clicking on these to remove those. And so now I'm down to just the successful sales and just the dollar amounts. Now, here's my trick. I don't need success in the column area anymore because I'm filtering on success, so I'm only showing the successful ones, and you can see my filter remains in place. But I really want my years to be in columns so that I can see who bought from me in 2013 and who bought in 2014. So if somebody last bought from me in 2014, that's the first group I want to make. My technique here is basically going to be I'm going to make a group of companies that bought from me in 2014. Then I'm going to hide those or roll those up, and what's left will be the ones that bought from me in 2013 because I've only got 2 years showing here. If I had a 3rd year to cover, I would do this. I would just iterate one more time to get what I'm after. So to start with, I'm going to turn off the 2014 ones, and I'm going to highlight all of the ones that are still showing. These are the ones that last bought from me in 2014. How do I know? Because it's still 2014, and they bought from me this year, so that's who those are. So I highlight those, and I'm going to make one big group out of all the ones that I see in that list. And So I'm going to call them 2014, and I'm going to name the group that they're in year last bought. Now, what have I got? I haven't told myself much yet because I'm still, you know, I only named one item, and I'm only seeing that one item broken down between these. But here's where this is going to get interesting, because now I'm going to open up and show also the 2013 ones. And all the ones that are in the 2014 group are all pulled together because I made a group of those first. That means the ones who last bought in 2013 are all on the list down below here. Now, if you had 2012 here as well, you might do this same thing and you know, turn on 2013, make a group of your ones who are in 2013, as I'm going to do now. And I could do it here, or I could, as Carnegie suggested, do it right here inside that field. Create another group, call these 2013. And then if I were doing this with, if I had 2012 here as well, I could turn on 2012, and I would get another list down below here and put those together. You see where I go with that. And the idea here is, all right, now I've got a nice, simple field that tells me something it's not data that's inherent, that's actually in the database visibly. There's no place, there's no field in there at the company, at the contact level in Goldmine that tells me what year they last bought. But for my reporting purposes, there is that very much, and that will allow me to identify who I'm after. Specifically, I wanted to know who bought from us in 2013 that did not buy from us in 2014. Well, there they are. It's this group right there. Now, who are those? I don't know yet. If I double-click on this, of course, I'll see my list. These are all the ones in that list. That's a whole all the detail for those. And of course, I could go and say, all right, sales rep, let's sort these by sales rep, and say, Lori, okay, Lori, you need to call these. Nancy, you need to call those. Rob, you need to call those, and so on. Or I might build a Goldmine group out of those and assign them to call them if there's hundreds of them or thousands. Build a Goldmine group, of course, function right there on the drill down page, on the drill down tab. Or I might just want to roll it down within the report itself. And this is where I mentioned before about sometimes wanting to have reports that you simply just roll down, roll up. Roll up for convenience, or roll up for simplicity, but roll down to see the detail that's behind what you're looking at. Okay, so if they last bought in 2013, then who are they? Just the company names? Let's double-click here and roll it down by company. That's the actual company names of who bought from you. Now, of course, each one of these might represent more than one sale. So when we drilled down, we saw a long list. But in actuality, there were only, I could count these, or I could just highlight them and look down here. There are 15 individual companies that need to be followed up on here. Let's get the sales reps working on them. Of course, you might apply other criteria here to make sure. Well, are they, you know, they're not clients for us this year. Maybe there's already some reason in the database that they're not. They're out of business or something. If you've got a field in your database that tracks, you know, their status, or let's say their record type, then you could go in here and say, well, okay, one's an employee, we're not going to sell to that one, so let's turn those off, and you know, whatever else. Use whatever criteria you have available to you to limit this to, you know, the appropriate follow-up activity. Let's see. Oh, okay. So and now that that is grouping. I covered a lot of things on grouping by dates. There's one more thing that I wanted to do, which is grouping by numbers. And we're getting close to the end of our hour here, so I've actually timed it just about right. I still am going to allow for some questions here at the end, so stick around if you want to have questions. Of course, we've got our drawing as well. But the last thing I want to do is one more type of grouping, which is numeric. So we've got year last bought. I'm going to move that off, so we're no longer selecting on that. And I want to do a grouping of our clients by how much they bought from us, the size of the actual purchases. So I'm going to take the amount field, drag it over here, and I'm going to do a grouping by numeric value. So there's a nice button here for doing numeric range grouping. When you select either one of these range items, it's actually for doing groups. And In this numeric range grouping, what I want to do is I'm going to say starting at, I want something actually wider than actually, I'm just going to take the default values there. So we'll group it by 10,000. So in other words, everything that's below 10,000 is in one group, everything that's above 10,000. By taking the default there, my lowest value in there was 111, so I wound up with some rather odd groups there. I think what I really want to do is start with 0 and let it do it that way. So that's a somewhat more intelligent kind of a grouping here. So now we can use these criteria together. We could say, all right, of the ones who last bought from us in 2013, where are the ones that actually bought the most? Okay, it's these right here. Easy enough, we've identified who those are. Let's double click, make sure we make a call to Einstein Parts and Labor. That'll be our first priority. Our second priority is going to be the group that bought a lot, that also bought a lot, but it's only one other one, and so on. Or actually display the companies within there and see them how we want to work with them. So that is numeric grouping. I didn't go into that in too much detail. It works in a way that you would think would be fairly logical. A starting number and a grouping number. So starting at 0, grouping by 10,000s, or grouping by 100,000s would actually have given us only 2 items within there. This is very commonly used for things like, well, like what I just did here, which is amount bought, that kind of thing. Or it might also be used for age, like 30, 60, 90. There's a field built into MasterMine that you can easily do with reports that is an aging field. I'll just show it as long as we're here. So days forecast to lead, days forecast to sale. There also a days. I was thinking there's another days field here. Days since. Yeah, days between today, whatever today is when you're running the report, and the date that this thing happened. So aging-wise, it's also easy to do 30, 60, 90 reports using that numeric grouping field.
Can it also be used, Rob, for zip codes for marketing purposes? A lot of people.
Absolutely. So you mean we don't actually have a zip code in here, but let's go ahead and grab a zip. Now, the thing with zip codes is we actually have some things built in here for working with zip codes, like postal zone. Postal zone is the first 3 characters of your zip code. So you might want to pull that field as opposed to the entire 5 or 9-digit zip code. But let's assume for the moment we want to do the zips here, the full zip. So yeah, you could take your zips, line them out like that. Now in this case, I'll just open these all up. And here you would typically do either manual grouping, something like that, or you could do search grouping, where in fact you could do a little more advanced grouping where it begins with certain values, 551, 554, 591, etc. So that would allow you to do it that way. Or you could actually pull, as I mentioned, the first 3 characters or the first 2 characters of the zip code. That's another trick, so I'll throw that in here. Let's say we add the field, and rather than pulling the entire zip code, you might do something like this. I'm going to name it zip2, and I'm going to apply an expression here that just says, give me the leftmost 2 characters of the. You need to know a little bit of SQL syntax to do that, but that gives me the leftmost 2 characters of the zip field as a field that I can work with, and that would allow me very easily to go in and say, all right, not only do I have the first 2 characters only, grouping them by those, but I might also, because they're all numeric, they're not all numeric because we probably have some that are blank in there. So we didn't need to do a little bit of massaging on that actual expression so that all of these actually, if there's no zip code, it actually comes through as a numeric like 00 or something. But once we had done that, we could actually use our numeric grouping to say, okay, take everything that's between 0 and 10 and put those together, everything that's between 10 and 20, put those together, and so on. So good question.
Very nice.
All right, so we've covered a lot of things related to grouping here. We should go ahead, let's go ahead and do our drawing for those who have really hung tough with us and been through the whole thing. But we will take questions also if you want to put any questions that you've got into the dialogue. Carnegie, I'm going to give you, do you need any time, or have you got all you've got your drawing ready to go?
I got everybody in my hat.
Okay, excellent.
Are we ready?
We are ready. Choose our big winner. This will be a 1.5 hour free MasterMine consultation, report writing, data management, grouping stuff, whatever it is that you need to done.
All right, our winner today is Sue Agnew.
Sue Agnew. Congratulations, Sue Agnew. And you will, Carnegie, I presume you'll contact Sue and schedule that?
I will give you a call after this, Sue.
Okay, and anybody else, of course, out there, if you were not the lucky winner today, but you would like some help with grouping or reporting or data management or whatever, do, of course, give us a call, and we will, under our typical support arrangement, we will work with you online. You can get support units through the under user support on the mastermind.net website. Okay, do we have any questions, Carnegie, or are they just exhausted?
I think they're exhausted.
I know I talk fast. Yeah, I talk fast, and there's a lot of things related to grouping in the pivot table, but really that's one of the most useful. I mean, it really gets at the crux of what the purpose of the pivot table is, to be able to aggregate data, roll it up, roll it down, present it in just the way that's necessary to give somebody a real understanding of what it is that's in the data. And so I'm glad that you came and joined with us today for our webinar. If you found this really useful, let us know. If you did not find it useful, please especially let us know. Let us know how we can do it better. And thank you all for coming today, and we'll see you next month.